Hi there, welcome to the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. I'm Todd Rhoades, one of the co-founders over at Chemistry Staffing. I'm glad you're here joining me as we wrap up this 2-week series on hiring for your church. Christmas is next week. I know everybody, man, is so busy. This is the Super Bowl for churches. And I'm so glad that you're taking some time to listen today. We're going to be here next week. I hope you'll be able to listen and subscribe. That way you won't miss anything that happens on the podcast next week. We've got some great episodes ready for you next week. Today, I want to talk about, as we end out this week in this series, we talk about one of the most critical and sometimes confusing questions in the hiring process. And that question is this: when is the right time to hire? Timing is everything when it comes to bringing on new staff. Move too soon and you might stretch your resources too thin. Wait too long and you risk burnout or stagnation or missed opportunities with your current staff. So today, I'm hoping that we can break this down for you a little bit, help you figure out whether or not your church is ready to hire, and if so, how to move forward with confidence. And this comes at a great time, and it's the end of the year. A lot of churches, maybe you've already got your budget all around. Maybe you've just approved your budget and you have budgeted for a new staff member for 2025. So maybe this is hitting you at just the right time. But let's talk about this. When is the right time to hire? And let me start here, okay? I'm going to give you the consultant answer, right? There's no one-size-fits-all answer to when a church should hire. Every church is unique, and every church has different needs and budgets and dynamics. But there are some key signs that it might be time to add someone to your team, okay? So let's take a look at those. Let's see, I've got 5 of them here for you today. All right, so when should you hire? How do you know it's time to hire? The first kind of guidepost that you could look at is your current team is overwhelmed. This is pretty straightforward. Is your staff working long hours, constantly putting out fires, or feeling stretched too thin? If so, man, that's a red flag. Overwork leads to burnout, leads to turnover. So if you think your team is overwhelmed now, lose another staff member, and it's going to be even a much bigger problem than hiring. So take a look at your current staff and your volunteers, and are they operating at a sustainable pace? Are they able to be healthy, or are they on the road to burnout? If they're not healthy, if they're overworked and underpaid, maybe underappreciated, it might be time to bring in at least one reinforcement, okay? So first thing, look and ask yourself, is my current team overwhelmed? Number 2, are there ministry opportunities that are being missed? That's another sign that it's time to hire, and that's when ministry opportunities are slipping through the cracks. Maybe your church is growing, but you don't have enough leaders to disciple new believers. That's a ministry crack that you need to fill. Perhaps you've identified a new outreach opportunity, but you don't have the capacity to act on it. Here's the thing. Growth and impact often require some investment, and it's more than just money, okay? If you're holding back because you're understaffed, you could really be missing out on what God has and wants to do through your church. That's another time to hire, is when you have ministry opportunities that are just falling through the cracks and you're missing them, okay? Number 3, you're constantly relying on volunteers for core functions. Now, volunteers are amazing, right? And I think the best churches actually utilize volunteers really substantially. But volunteers, while they're amazing, they're not a substitute for staff when it comes to critical ongoing responsibilities. And if your volunteers are filling gaps that really require full-time leadership, it's a sign that you're probably understaffed. I knew of a church once that relied on volunteers to lead their youth ministry for years, and eventually the volunteers just burned out, ministry began to struggle, and when they finally hired a full-time youth pastor, it absolutely revitalized the program and gave consistency that it needed to thrive. But that new youth pastor, that new full-time youth pastor, had to almost start from scratch because all the volunteers had left. They were just so tired and so burned out. So if you're constantly relying on volunteers for core functions that really need full-time leadership, it's probably time to consider a new hire. Number 4, you've outgrown your current team structure. Sometimes the need to hire isn't about burnout or gaps, it's just about growth. If your church is in a growing spurt and your staffing structure probably needs to grow with it, a team that worked well for 150 people probably is not sustainable at 300 people. So if your church has reached a new level of growth or a different level of complexity, it's worth asking whether or not your church team is equipped, the current church team is equipped to meet the challenges, or if you need to bring somebody else on your team. And then the last one, number 5, is if your budget allows it. Of course, none of this matters if you can't afford it. But here's the good news. Hiring isn't an all or nothing decision. If your budget's tight, consider creative options like maybe hiring part-time, maybe sharing a staff member with another church, maybe phasing in a new position over time. But the key is to balance that financial stewardship with the needs of your ministry. Okay, I've got 5 questions for you today. You might want to take out a piece of paper. This is the rubber meets the road, the next step for an honest look at your church's current staffing position and condition. And I want you to ask yourself 5 questions, okay? Number 1, is my team overwhelmed, or are they on the verge of burnout? And if you don't know, ask a team member. They'll gladly tell you how they're doing. So that's question number 1. Question number 2, are we missing any ministry opportunities because of a lack of capacity? Number 3, are our volunteers filling roles that require full-time leadership? Number 4, these just come from the points I just talked about. Have we outgrown our current staffing structure? And number 5, does our budget support a new staff hire? Or can we find a creative solution that might make it work? And if you're answering yes to any of these, it might be time to start that hiring process, or at least investigating it. And if you're still unsure, gather your leadership team together and pray through it. Sometimes clarity can come from more of a collective discernment. And if you're on the fence, even after today's podcast, and you're like, Todd, I just don't know. I don't know. Should we hire? Should we not hire? I don't know. If you're on the fence right now about whether or not it's a great time to hire or a bad time to hire, reach out to me, podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. Let's talk. I'd love to have a conversation with you, find out a little bit more about your situation, see if there's any way that I can help you in my role here at Chemistry Staffing. I'm not a high sales person, so you don't have to worry about any kind of a sales scheme from me. I just really want to hear what you're going through and see if there's any way that I can help. And hey, if you've enjoyed this series, I'd love it if you would hit subscribe if you haven't done it already, or maybe forward or tell somebody, a colleague, a fellow staff member, or somebody at a different church about this podcast as well. We always want to put this in the hands of as many church staff people as we can. The content is very unique, that it's tailored specifically for church staff leadership and church staff people. You can always reach out to me anytime with any kind of suggestions of what you'd like to hear on the podcast at chemistrystaffing.com. All right, that's it for today, and next week is Christmas. We're going to be here. If you need to take a break from even the podcast, don't do that. Don't do that. But if you have to take a break from the podcast, we'll see you the first week in January, and you can always hit subscribe and listen to all of them. But in the meantime, I hope you have just an absolutely great season of ministry during the Christmas season at your church, and I hope that you have a great Christmas and a very happy New Year with you and your family. All right, thanks so much. Merry Christmas.